Hello, everyone. This is Chris Dew with E1, and I'm so glad you joined me today. We're talking about PopDoc and specifically for how we can access that Dynamics GP data outside of GP, right? I think many of you on the call here have been probably using smart lists for a number of years. I personally have been using it for almost 25 years now, because I used to work for Great Plains and Microsoft, and now E1, where we've spent a lot of time on that. But we're going to talk about those smart lists, how you can now turn this around and be able to access it outside of GP and even further in the cloud, so that you can basically enable this to wherever you work. You can access your Dynamics GP data. So we're going to start by going through just a little tour of what is PopDoc. Some of you, this is probably your first look at it, and I want to make sure that you understand that. One little thing before we get started, I would love to have you ask questions today. So I would encourage you to use the questions area of this GoToWebinar and put your questions in there. I may not answer them right away, but I will definitely come through at the end and answer any questions that you have out there. So I would encourage you to do that to make sure that we are, answering exactly what you want to know. Okay, let's get started. So really, what is PopDoc? Let's start with that. At its core, it really is a tool for the end user, right? We want to make sure that you have access to make those ad hoc reports, those things that you need to do without necessarily calling an IT person every time. So what does that mean, right? It could be simple as adding the filters, or it could be grouping the data, or a number of things. We're trying to do that so that, again, you don't necessarily need to call an IT person every time. So at its core, it is that. Another really key piece of this is we're connected to whatever the data is. And again, we're talking about GP. This is a real-time connection. So we are making sure that you're hooking into whatever the data source is. This happens to not be a GP one, but whatever the data source, we're hooking in directly to it and pulling back that data immediately. It's not sitting in a data warehouse somewhere. This is real live data coming from GP. Okay. The third thing I want to talk about is really, it doesn't have to be GP data, right? This is going to be the focus of our call today, but we're going to talk about that there's the capabilities exist inside of here at no additional cost to start pulling other information together. And so I think for a lot of us, we don't just use one application anymore. I probably use 8 different applications to get through my day. And so it's great to be able to have one place to kind of bring all of that together. And so you'll see how we can connect to any type of information. Now, the other part that's really a key to this is that this data could be anywhere. Like I said, we're talking about how you can access that GP data outside of the GP interface. And so this is an example, right? Seeing some orders inside of like a CRM system, or again, we could even have some other information inside of GP, or Salesforce is another CRM system. I could have, kind of my smart list type scenario inside of there. Here it is inside of a help desk system like Zendesk. You can see that we're allowing you to pull information wherever you work, even if it's inside the Teams. So I think a ton of us have used that this year. So if I wanted to see some invoices from GP right inside of Teams, I could do something like that. Okay. One of the goals, and I think even how a lot of you have used smart lists in the past, is this is data to help you do your job every day, right? It's something saying, hey, if there's anything in this list, that means I need to do something, right? Maybe it's something with shipping some products out, or maybe it's customers over a credit limit, giving those people a call, or maybe it's finding inventory levels that are low for that. Whatever it is, we're trying to give you the data that you need, and we don't just leave you there. I think that's a key part, as a lot of this stuff is like saying you need to do something with it, but we also give you the means to do something with it. We have the capabilities of putting actions on a lot of this data. So we could, in some cases, we can drill down to other systems. We can also do some actions like, well, running a Smart Connect example for, I think a number of you may have Smart Connect on this call today, because that's one of our most popular products. Well, there's some really awesome integration that we can do. Well, we can initiate that right from PopDoc. So that's the awesome part, is that I could actually take that data, do something with it. And we'll give you a couple of concrete examples of that a bit later. All right, so there's a quick overview, but I think, again, one of my professors always said the proof of the eating is in the pudding. So, or the proof of the pudding is in the eating of it. So let's get into that part and show you really what does this look like. So instead of starting inside of PopDoc, I'm actually going to take a little journey. We're going to step immediately outside of the PopDoc interface and show you some of those scenarios. And then we're going to kind of dig back in and show you all the customization and everything you can do. So if I open up, oh no, wait, I wasn't starting there, was I? If we go inside of CRM, what I want to show you is that this is an example where this is a widget. We call this virtual integration, if you will, where I have embedded this in just a matter of minutes inside of CRM, but I now have a live look into my orders and invoices right inside of GP. And so you can see for this account, which is basically a customer, this would be my GP customer, I have all of their invoices in this case pulling from here. So this is something, like if you did a full integration, this might be 10 to 15 moving pieces where you had to move and synchronize data back and forth between systems, where like I said, in a matter of a couple minutes, I can have this whole interface. And now this is where it gets kind of fun, because all those things that you're used to inside of Smart Lists, now we start bringing those out here, and we've even enhanced some of those things. So I think you'll get excited about it. So let's start talking about it. I have my data here with just a few columns. If I choose to add a new column, and let's say in this one, I want the location where these orders are coming from. So if I do that, I'm going and grabbing the new data. So it's now going out and grabbing it from my system. So there we go, there's my location. I can drag and drop this to be the first field, for example, if that's an important one. And so now I have that additional field, I've been able to move it. Now here's something kind of fun. I can group by it. So all of a sudden, now I have all the transactions that came from these individual places. So here's from the Schaumburg location for this customer, or the Willowbrook, or the downtown. We can see this one is killing it. So they have a lot more sales that we're selling to this particular customer at their downtown location, as opposed to the any of the other ones. Now, a cool thing to point out here is you have automatic subtotals. If you want, depending on the types of fields, you can do, you can do summing of the data, you can do an average, we'll get into that, but you have a lot of control over you want to do this, and you can see that was easy, right? I literally grouped by one field, I could group by additional fields if it made sense, you just keep dragging them up. It's that easy. Now, some other things, of course, I think filters is going to be one of those things that the GP crew is really going to love in PopDoc, because we can have an unlimited amount, right? I can keep mashing on this button. There's no more 4, right? That's where we were stuck in the GP world. I can keep going and add as many filters as I like. And even like our internal account managers, they use several lists where they have probably 8 to 10 filters on them. They save them as favorites, and they quickly go back to it and just tweak it as they need. Now, another important part, let's talk about some of these types of filters. And I'll use a date, because I think that's probably one of the really common ones we use in the accounting world, is I could either pick a particular date, or again, maybe between a couple of different dates. But I want to do something a little different here, because I'm gonna keep it at equals, but instead of picking a particular date value, I'm going to do what we call a comparison here. And so then now I could say, you know what, I want all the orders for this week, or this month, or last month, or last quarter. You can kind of see how this could be really helpful, because you do stuff like that, and now we save this as a favorite, we can quickly go back to it and see that information. Another really cool thing, right, is you're not stuck on just ands. You can quickly click on this, and I just changed that to an or. So you have a lot of flexibility over how you want to use these filters. And then again, like I said, you save this, and then if you like it, you have all the columns you want, you can make that a favorite, and you can quickly go back to it. Another thing that's really important in here is that, again, we can see additional information. So what does that mean? Let me click on this one. I can actually, what I'm going to show you is I can drill back to other systems or even this current system. So without even opening the invoice, I'm going to go grab the line items for this invoice. So if we start scrolling through, we can see there's a few on this one. But we now can see all of the line items that made up the invoice. So we're inside of a CRM system, totally outside of GP, and we have access to all of that information to be able to drill down to it. Now, another thing I think that's really important in here for a lot of people is this is great. Now my customer says, you know what, could I get that list of invoices? Could you tell me which ones? Because I need to match it up. Well, we have export built in everywhere that it'll dump it to Excel, and you watch how fast this is. Boom, it's done. It's downloaded. We have our Excel file. So even if you had 10,000 records in there, 20,000, 30,000, it's going to take a couple seconds. And to me, that's a huge improvement over some of the things that we've had inside of GP in the past. Now, another thing besides just that, okay, there we go. Just had a little internet slowness there for a second. But what this just did is it went out, and again, whether it was FedEx or UPS or USPS or DHL, whatever it is, it's pulling live tracking information on that package that I put out there. So this is pretty cool that, again, from one place in a totally different system, I can access all kinds of information that's related, whether it's still in GP or in an external shipping system or whatever it may be. I can also do some fun things, right? We talked about if it's a possibility, I can drill back to that customer, or I could even run a Smart Connect process on here. I'm going to give you some other examples of data and then actions that you can do. So if I click on this tab, what you'll see here is that I have help desk tickets. So now I'm getting a full view of this customer. I'm getting their information from GP, but I'm also able to see additional information. And the key I wanted to show you here is there's a lot more actions. So right from here, I could actually update the priority on this ticket. So we can see it's marked urgent right now. I could say, you know what, it's not urgent anymore. We can just bring it back to a normal level. And if I refresh this, we should be able to see the changes because this is something that, again, was interactive. And there we go. We can see that this priority has been changed to normal. And so we have that live look into now our help desk system. We could even have a little more visual look at this. This is kind of interesting because what's pulling up right now, we haven't talked about this much, but we can actually give you some charts. We have about 10 of them. And so we're not, we don't have 2,000 like Power BI because that's not our main focus. Our main focus is getting you the data to do your job. But you can see that if you want a pie chart or a buyer chart or something like that, we can break this down. So here's our GP sales that we've done, but it's now breaking it into a pie chart. So we can see this is a pizza company. We sell them a lot of cheese. That makes sense. We can also, again, just showing you, here's another example. This is pulling, instead of from GP, it's pulling from a custom SQL database I have on another server. And so this is like their pizza orders that they have. And so you can see, again, we can just present it in a slightly different way if that makes sense to you. Okay, I'm going to take you just probably one more place, and then we're going to dig into how can you customize this for your GP. So, okay, I might take you two places. What I wanted to show you, again, Teams, there's probably a lot of you on here that have in the last 18 months have used these collaboration tools more than you ever imagined. Even internally, I know at E1, we use Teams a lot to communicate with all of our team. So this is a great way of doing that, but again, bringing the data that you need to do your job. So instead of like invoices in this case, this is some information on project. So if you had a channel over here that you wanted to attach some GP information to, in 30 seconds, you could be displaying that information. And the beautiful part is it looks and feels just like the application that you're in. So now you have the information you need to do your job. And again, if you had any actions on here, doesn't look like I have any on this one. I could use this as a launch pad to go into wherever we need to go. Okay, I'm going to do one more thing before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, and that is I realize this again. Like I said, I've worked for GP, I've worked for Microsoft, I've worked for E1 over the last 25 years. I still love working with GP, but we realize that, GP is probably not going to be around forever. So there may be some of you that are saying, yes, I'm making plans that while we're happy with GP today, in a couple of years, we're making some plans to move to some other system, or maybe it's 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. Whatever it may be, I think more and more people are starting to think about this. And really what PopDoc is a vehicle to help you as you're making those plans and as you may be moving to other systems. This is a way for you to bring that information that you need in that transition time. So what I'm going to show you next is just we've had a number of customers that have gone to Microsoft's Business Central, and well, there's kind of two main things that we hear from Microsoft and from customers, and that is that number one, where are my smart lists? And so we've actually had Microsoft kind of call us out and say, hey, like none of our customers are upgrading to BC because you don't have Smart List Builder. So we're gonna address that PopDoc is something that does that. The other part is when people do migrate, is a lot of times they struggle with that historical data, right? You've been using GP for 5, 10, 15, 20 years plus. And so how do you make sure that you can access that information? And again, a lot of times maybe not even not want to maintain, I'll say it this way, not want to maintain that server. So I'm just going to very quickly just show you that there's some really cool pieces of PopDoc that can help you in that journey, whether it's going to like Business Central or if you went to NetSuite or Intact or Acumatica. We have ways that we can give you that GP data as we go forward. So if I go inside of here, what I want to show you very quickly is that we have basically PopDoc is your smart lists for Business Central. And so if we go inside of here, I'll just pull up a list. This is now Business Central data instead of GP, just showing you very quickly. But it looks the same. It's just now embedded inside of there. So we've given it a little different field dressing, but all the same stuff, right? Adding columns, adding filters, creating a face all in there, and you can do that. What I want to show you though, for a lot of people, like I said, is how do I access historical data? And so this is kind of a key thing. We have done a process with PopDoc to move GP data to what's called a data lake. So it's a really cost-effective way of storing your data. And then again, you don't necessarily need to maintain your SQL Server anymore. But this is a unique list. This is a custom list that is, if we look at this last column, you can see some of this data is coming from the new system, right? It's coming from the Business Central system that they've migrated to. If I scroll down a few hundred records, you can see things change. Now we can see that these records are coming from the GP data. that I move to a data lake. And so this is great because now I have one list that has both the new information from sales transactions, in this case, there could be purchase, whatever it is, and then we've matched it to the historical information. Now let me take it a step further. We can actually even embed this on wherever it needs to be. So if it's on a customer card or a vendor or an inventory item, whatever it may be, we can put that contextual information. So if I scroll down here, you can see now I'm not seeing all of the sales transactions. I'm only seeing the 125 line items for Aaron Fitz, which is our buddy from GP that's been migrated over. So now kind of flipping the script, these first ones, I don't have the field on here, but I can tell by these document numbers, these are GP transactions. If I go into the second 100, we can see these last ones in here are new invoices that have been put in there from Business Central. So you can see for me, this is a great way if you are considering this in the future, is that we can give you that look and that view into your historical GP that isn't able to make the migration process while helping you transition to using the new system. Okay, that's all. I'll talk about that, but it's a real thing on a lot of people's minds today is how can I use this today? How does this enable me to, free that data up for people that aren't necessarily inside of GP? And then how does it prepare me to move if I'm considering moving to in the future? All right, so now we're going back to the PopDoc. This is the web application. So it's really the core of everything I've shown you. I've just shown you embedded in a lot of other systems, and that's the beauty of it, right? Is that wherever you choose to work, we can bring that data. But this is kind of one place to bring it all home, if you will. And you can see in this GP connector that I have, right now we have a payables transaction list. So again, if I wanted to add some columns, we could tick, 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 and add any of these columns for our GP list. I'm not sure which ones I picked. We'll see how good the data is. Skippy's taking time here. Let me just refresh that real quick. Okay, I just maybe need to refresh my browser because everything was there. But now you can see we have the new fields I just clicked on. I think I grabbed batch source, cash amount, and those. So we have some information on there, so you can see that. Again, the same types of things that I showed you, right? If we wanted to see this by vendor ID instead, now we have a grouping. Now we get those subtotals by vendor, which is pretty cool. Have a capability, all those filters. Again, the favorites. We can create a new favorite. We can share it with teams or specific users. All that functionality is there. And again, one thing I didn't really mention, but you can actually pull data across companies. So if I wanted to, I could say, hey, I want it from this company and this company. It's now gonna do something kind of cool because it adds another column for the company where I can tell where the transaction's coming from. So we can see all those ones on this first screen are coming from the Fabricam company. So to me, this is a huge feature that's inside of there. Okay, but what I want to show you now is I want to dig into really how easy is it to get new custom lists or to customize these lists, right? We talk about Smart List Builder. How can I use my Smart List Builder lists? So that's what we're going to talk about now is really how do we free that data up? So I'm going to start with this, right? If we want to add a brand new connection, you can see there's a ton of them inside of here. Here's a ton of the Microsoft ones we have. Again, obviously we're talking about Dynamics GP today. So how do I connect to that GP data? We can do that. Some other cool things just to maybe spell out is we can connect to other SQL-like sources, whether it be Oracle or MySQL or some of those, as well as SQL Server, and we can even connect to some of those other cloud services. So like I said, you can connect to all kinds of data and bring it together. Even if it's something we haven't built a dedicated connector for, we have a way of connecting to that data. Oh, I went a little crazy there. There we go. I want to show you this existing connector that I have though for Dynamics GP. All right. So if we look at these groups, right, you'll recognize these. These are what's coming from smart lists. So these are our smart list, groups. And then I have all my lists. So there's almost 100 of them for, out of the box for Dynamics GP. There's a ton of them there. But you go, okay, what if I want to add new lists? So you can hit this button right here, and this is going to pull up, there's a few lists that we haven't done necessarily. Some of the payroll ones, we don't make those default, so you have to enable those if you want. Same thing with like human resources, but let's say you build something with Smart List Builder. We can actually go tick, tick, tick and add these as new lists. So it's really that easy. If it exists inside of there, we're going to be able to pull that information out. Even again, if you tried to go on the cheat before, if you tried using Microsoft's version of Smart List Builder, so I call it Baby Smart List Builder or Smart List Designer, we can even pull those lists if you built something with Smart List Designer. So this is a great way, again, of taking your Dynamics GP data and bringing it to wherever it needs to go. So you can also, right, you're never limited to just that. What if you've actually built some SQL views? So I've had a number of customers go, hey, you know what, we never bought Smart List Builder, but we built some really great SQL views. Can I use those? Yes. Basically, you can go down to the SQL view level. You can even go down to the table level if you wanted to, and we can bring all of that information into PopDoc, and then again, make it available anywhere we need to. Okay, so let's look at an existing list because there's some really cool things that we can talk about here. So let's pull up the customer list. I think most people understand customers, and it'll help demonstrate a few things. You can see we pull all these fields. So these are, all these default fields that are inside of GP. You can change the names of these though, right? Very, very easily. You go, hey, I want this to be called something different. You can change their type, right? So some of these user-defined fields you maybe had, maybe it's a string inside of GP, but you're really storing some kind of a number or something like that. You can change it from a string to a number or a quantity or whatever it could be inside of there. We talked about summary before. And if we look at this, we have, well, if it's a numerical type field, we could do what we're summarizing, but we could also, if we wanted to, we could change it to an average. So you can see the field I'm looking at is called average days to pay. It doesn't really make sense, I should say, to summarize, all the average days to pay. Why don't we have an average of the average days to pay? That makes a lot more sense. Or again, sometimes maybe it's just counting the number of records might make sense. So those are some great ways that you can easily configure this data inside of here. Now again, this is where things get kind of interesting because you can see even on this customer list, I have about 15 calculated fields. So you can do some really cool things where you can kind of do those calculations if you want. Maybe it's simply adding a couple fields together. Maybe it's doing some math. Maybe it is actually a little more of like a case statement saying, if this, then that value. So you have a lot of flexibility, and it kind of, some of that Smart List Builder stuff starts sneaking in here because it allows you to do some of those things even beyond the smart list that you've already built in Smart List Builder. You can still do some really cool things inside of this interface. Well, the last thing I'll mention on this part is that you can choose which fields will default. So when we pull up the customer list, we can see that it only has 8 fields on, but if we wanted to have more, you can see tick, 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 and I can add as many fields as makes sense to pull back on the default data. We can put permanent restrictions on this list, kind of like you can do in Smart List Builder, right? Where you can say, hey, let's always filter out, this particular type of transaction or something like that. You can put in those permanent restrictions if you like. Now, this part is really fun. I'm not sure how many of you actually used Smart List Builder inside of GP this way, but you could actually build like a summary Smart List and then drill down to another Smart List that would give you the details on that. Well, you can do that and more inside of PopDoc, because in this example, you can see I have a couple of things from the customer. I could drill down to all the addresses for the customer, and this is kind of interesting. You can choose where to see that information. The example I showed you just a little bit ago, I showed you the line items off of an invoice from GP down below, and that was down below, right? So that's below the record. But there's a sidebar I kind of showed you where it had like shipping information. That's where and in the sales orders, we've actually shown that below the record. So that's what I love about this type of stuff. Okay, we're going to go back to here where we have this main lists, and this is where it gets really exciting for me, because we can also do custom lists. So then some of the smart list people are like, what? I don't necessarily need to, use Smart List Builder anymore, or why would I? I mean, those are some of the questions that people have. I'll say this right from the start. If you're building a list with only GP data, there's probably no better way by the smart of doing it than inside House Builder. It gives you all of the nice names directly to SQL and stuff. It gets more complex. So I'll say this, it's probably the best way if you are familiar with it, building a list in Smart List Builder and then just checking the box to say I want to see it inside of PopDoc is probably your best way. But this is where things get kind of interesting, because now I can do this. I could join lists like I did in Smart List Builder. So I could join, like, for example, the sales line items with the sales header and the customer, right? I could join all those lists, but it doesn't have to be just GP data. I could actually pull in some information from Salesforce, for example. So I could have Salesforce information attached to my GP customer. And if I had 10 custom fields inside of Salesforce, I could now have one list that had all the important stuff from GP and those 10 custom fields that are sitting inside of some other system, like I said, Salesforce or e-commerce or something like that. So you can now take very different data sources. Again, one GP is stored in like a SQL server, and then CRM systems oftentimes have some kind of an API or web service. We're now able to join those in kind of a virtual SQL way. So that's what's exciting, because now you can bring the data together that you need in one place to do your job. We have a merge list. That's kind of like a union. And I gave you an example of that earlier, where when I showed you the GP historical data being combined with the new data from Business Central. So that was an example of a merge list where I'm taking two different systems and bringing that in together. We can do comparisons, right? This is a big one, especially with like CRM systems. So maybe you're comparing your GP customer with the accounts is usually what they're called in CRM systems. So I'm comparing which ones haven't made it into GP yet. And then I might use an integration process like Smart Connect to say, hey, let's use PopDoc as the data source, because that's built in. That's pretty cool too. So for any of you that have Smart Connect, PopDoc is available inside of there to hook into any kind of data. And so a lot of times we use it to a comparison list to pull that information and then only create those 3 customers or something like that inside of GP. So there's some really cool things that are built right inside of here that make it very easy to create those custom lists. All right, I'm going to show you just a couple more things and then we'll get to questions. So if any of you have been saving up your questions, I think there's one in there right now. Please get your questions in and we'll start answering them in just a few moments. Okay, some of you might be asking, okay, that's great. Looks like I can access all that GP data, and you showed me that I can access data from e-commerce systems and payment gateways and CRM systems, whatever it may be. But how do I start making my GP data available to other people? And what I'll show you right now, clicked the wrong one, is if I go into this developer tab, we have something called widgets, or I mentioned earlier, virtual integration. So this is a way for us to enable whatever data that we like to be made available outside of the system. So we'll just be really clever and call this demo. We have a number of types. So if it's just a specific list, or I showed you an example of more of that smart list type interface that we had put inside of Business Central, where I have as many lists as I want. I could do multiple lists, or I can even show some information, more of a sidebar. And there's a lot of those kinds of details. But let me show you just a quick example of a single list. I can pick any of my connectors. So I'll pick this GP one we were looking at. I can pick any company. I can pick, which group that stuff's coming from. So if we want to pick sales, for example, I can click on that, and then I can make my customer list, or whatever it needs to be. I can make that available. Now, an interesting thing is if you have a favorite, right? We talked a lot about favorites, being able to share those amongst other team members and stuff like that. But if you created a favorite saying only show me the customers that aren't on hold, right? Maybe that's the only thing that you want to make available externally. Excuse me, I just need a drink of water here real quick. All right, so I can take this list now and I can configure the fields. So by default, it's going to pull whatever the defaults were on that list. So I think we had about 5 or 8 fields in there. That will be my default fields. But you can override that if you say, hey, for this widget, I want to make more fields or less fields or something available. You have control over that. We can also pass in parameters, which is pretty cool because I can say I only want to see it for this particular customer. I want to see their information. So you can make parameters inside of there. You have a number of options on what you want to see. So if you didn't want to allow that export to Excel, you could do that. We can also change, like if you didn't want to have actions, for example, we can choose to do that or not. And again, there's a lot of features on there that you want to do. Now, a really cool thing is we can hit this preview button. And the part I love about this is we have a number of themes. So this is just our standard PopDoc theme. But if I wanted to do, something we can go kind of crazy, if we wanted to change it to the dark theme, for example, now this has the dark coloring of this, and again, just a very different view. It's the same data. Or again, if you were going to embed it inside of another system like Salesforce or CRM, we can have it, get basically change the way it's formatted so it looks and feels like the system that we're putting it inside of. Now, the most important part, people go, okay, that's cool, magical, but how easy or hard is it to put in other systems? And we basically give you everything you need as far as code inside of here. If it's an iframe and you want to do a theme, or again, if you were going to put it inside of Salesforce, for example, we generate this little page that you can copy and paste in. So there's some really cool things that we give you all the tools you need to quickly embed that data and do something like I had showed you before, right? So if we look at this, here's an example of being able to do that. Or this is that this is that bar chart, but here's an example of, again, inside of Salesforce now, this is that our invoices coming from GP. So I just wanted to show you that you have a lot of flexibility over again how we can enable that GP data to be placed anywhere we need to. So wherever you choose to work, right, whether it's in like a CRM system or an e-commerce system, or even we can embed this inside of like could be a portal or something like that. Whatever it means, we have all the tools to get that in wherever you need to work. All right, I think I'll wrap up kind of that demonstration part there, and then I want to get into the questions that are out there. So again, I encourage you to use the questions pane to ask your questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. All right, so we got a couple version questions, it looks like, already. One is asking, what's the last version of GP that supports Smart List Builder on its own? I'm guessing what you're asking, like there's a new promotion that's gone out where basically PopDoc now includes Smart List Builder and Smart View. So it's basically you're buying the PopDoc subscription, you get all those other apps as part of that. So I'm guessing they're maybe asking like what versions of GP will support just running Smart List Builder as opposed to needing the PopDoc. You can continue to use it even if you're on like say 2016 or something like that. You can continue to use Smart List Builder. That's kind of the key, is that this is not something like Smart List Builder is not going away. It's just one application of PopDoc. So there's not really an answer. We're not getting rid of any of those things. You're getting more, if that makes sense. Another question is asking, well, how far back of GP data can I pull? At the end of the day, really, like we've tested back to GP10. You can certainly do that. GP10, 2010, 2013, 2016, 2018, and then all the 18 dots. So those are all fine, but at the end of the day, we can get access to, even if you did have a really old version of GP, we could get access to that with the tools that we have inside of PopDoc. So another good question. Okay, yep, looks like somebody's typing a question. Go ahead and get any more questions that you have out there. Okay, here's a really good one. We have somebody asking if, well, what about security? You didn't talk much about security. Yeah, very good point. We have a couple different layers here. It's kind of interesting. So let's talk about first and foremost what I think a lot of people want to know about is how are you going to securely access my data? Because now you're talking about moving it outside of GP, and again, maybe even outside of my network. So what PopDoc utilizes is a couple different ways. So the PopDoc solution is a cloud-based solution. It's hosted in Microsoft Azure, and so there's a couple of ways. One really great way is called a Dynamics GP Data Gateway. And so we have a gateway that allows you to securely access the data on your network. We also have some options. We have this fully documented in a KB article that says, here are the basically the IP addresses from the Azure service that you need to pull in and be able to see that information. I guess basically be able to nail it down and lock it down to just those particular IP addresses. The other part to the security equation, again, I'm not sure if you wanted all this in your question, but another part to it is often around users. And they're like, well, is it using the GP users? It isn't necessarily. It's kind of maybe a little bit more like the Excel, if any of you guys have used the refreshable Excel reports, because those are kind of similar, right? You're now outside of GP, and so you want to make sure you have that security. So there is another layer, and again, where this really makes sense is that while you can restrict data down to the GP connector and even specific lists on a per user, or again, making a team, for example, like an AP team that has access to all this, what you need to realize is it may not just be GP data anymore. It may be data coming from a bunch of different systems. So it could be, one connector's GP, but then they also have access to, I don't know, some kind of a payment gateway like Stripe or something like that. So that's where things, get interesting, because we're no longer just talking about GP data. We're giving you access to potentially more than one system. So good question. All right, last call for questions. I don't see any more in there right now, so get them in if you have them. All right, I don't see any more questions in, so I want to thank everybody. Oh, well, someone raised their hand. Let's look at this here. Just a second. Okay, 1 second here. I'm just trying to pull up. Oh, okay, there's a couple more questions in here. Sorry, I was only seeing one of them. Okay, so someone was kind of clarifying, I guess, is saying, um, what what version of GP did I have that I can use PopDoc, or when can't I use SmartList Builder anymore? And like I said, SmartList Builder is going to be there for the foreseeable the foreseeable history. We believe it's an important part of the solution. We're just giving you a way of accessing that information outside of there. So SmartList Builder is part of PopDoc. Okay, another question is SharePoint one of the places where results can be displayed? Yes, we've done this a couple times. And do SmartList Builder users have to move to PopDoc by a certain time? Okay, a lot of good questions there. So yeah, third-party software, and this is the beautiful part. It does work. Again, a lot of you have maybe built smart lists on third-party software, like Key to Act is one that comes to mind, or like some Ethotech. I know there's a number of people that have built smart lists. So yes, all of those lists will come. But again, if you've done a SQL view or even the table, you can get at that third-party data. Then again, just reaffirming the question asking, is PopDoc replacing SmartList Builder? Nope. SmartList Builder is part of PopDoc, right? That's the new solution, is that SmartList Builder and even SmartView, if you wanted to use that, those are part of PopDoc going ahead. And then the last question is, do SmartList Builder users have to move to PopDoc by a certain time? We're not forcing that. Again, if you want to use your smart lists only inside a GP, you can certainly do that. If you want some of the other features of grouping and unlimited filters and just much faster data access, then you have the tools available to you in PopDoc. Okay, looks like somebody had asked about key to act data. I actually just addressed that a few earlier. So yes, you can pull from any of those third parties, and Key to Act is certainly one that has a number of smart lists. Okay. So someone said talking about SharePoint again. Yeah, the answer with SharePoint is yes. You can embed those widgets or virtual integration inside of SharePoint. And then, okay, somebody asked about Power GP Online. We have it hosted. Just a second. Will it work? Okay, there's a couple of different aspects there. I know they have different solutions, whether it's like you said, they're hosted, where they're just hosting your GP database for you, or in a terminal server, or if you're using the Power GP. There is a dedicated Power GP online connector. So if you're using that, otherwise there would have to be a solution like um, like like the gateway that I talked about, um, is probably what we'd look at working with them. But yeah, we've worked closely with the team there from Power GP Online, and we can find out whatever your scenario is, and make sure that's addressed. Okay, that's the end of the questions I see. So again, thank you everyone for your time today. And if you do have additional ones, please let us know, and we'd be happy to help you out with that. So thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.